that me? No. Hey, can you guys hear me?
Welcome.
Excellent. Are we ready? Everybody's good? All right, so this is definitely an interactive presentation. I guess it's less a presentation and more
How interactive would you say it is, Greg?
about that high. Anyway, routing best practices, we have to have a theoretical topic associated with any presentation we do, but I'd like to open it up to pretty much anything, any questions you have. A little bit about TheBrothersWISP very quickly. It's all these guys listed up here, and then a handful of guys right here. They'll introduce themselves momentarily. We're going to do it like we normally do a podcast, right? TheBrothersWISP.com. Evidently, people watch us on YouTube. I don't know why you'd look at our faces for more than a few moments, but I do all of my stuff through a podcatcher. I'd rather listen to it. That way I can speed it up for the boring parts. And there are lots of them, and people yell at us for not having time markers in the YouTube video, so I'm too lazy to fix that. Sorry, guys. But I want to give a big shout out on this one to the Little Brothers Wisp. That's what we call our patrons on Patreon. It's turned out to be one of my surprisingly favorite things about this is the Slacks. We run a Slack for our patrons, and they get in there and they get full access to all of these idiots.
Wait a minute. You're saying that just anybody can just get in there and ask us questions?
Yeah, if you're a patron, you can get in there and ask us questions. I love it, the discourse, because we have such a varied background of people. I mean, we have some guys that aren't necessarily even network guys. They're just server guys that do more, say, virtualization and infrastructure, and they just happen to use a little bit of networking stuff, and so they jump in there. So you get all these viewpoints, perspectives, international crowd. So I'm from Texas.
Oregon.
And you got?
Justin from Virginia.
And you got Thomas?
Thomas, Slovakia, Europe.
Yeah.
Justin from Indiana.
All right. Right, and so this is just a small sampling. We've also got some Australians, some New Zealanders, and an Irish guy when he shows up. Sometimes he shows up and he's not sober enough to talk. But no, it's a little joke for Tom. I know he won't listen to this, but just in case he does. All right, a little bit of guidelines for this. MikroTik related questions, please. Don't ask us about other vendors. We're at the MUM. We want to respect the people putting on this event. Don't ask us any questions like, when will XYZ feature be released? I mean, we don't work inside, so our crystal ball is probably just as good as yours. Routing-ish related questions are great, but I mean, we don't mind anything related. Anything that'll have spirited discourse is always good too. Please participate. This is going to be super boring because you'll just hear me talk. I mean, I love hearing the sound of my voice, especially when it echoes back at me. It's pretty dope. This guy loves it too. And after this, again, I want to encourage you guys, come up, introduce yourselves. I see a couple people that already have. Tell us who you are. Tell us how we can help you. Tell me something interesting I don't know. So I think that's about it. Just open it up for any questions, any hands that may raise. Oh, come on, guys. Slow start. We got one right here.
You guys want to give your opinions on the best practices for high availability with MikroTiks?
High availability, best practices.
Any particular context, BGP, OSPF,
First hop.
layer 2, layer 3?
Just consumer level, office level.
Oh, like an enterprise sort of thing? Yeah. All right. So I guess your average enterprise probably doesn't have a BGP session to their providers, right? So how would you go about doing that? Are we looking?
I was talking about like failover. Some fails, how could another take over?
Okay. So in an environment, an enterprise environment, looking for high availability. You guys want to
just
start?
looking for opinions.
Opinions, all right. MikroTik has some first hop redundancy protocols like VRRP. Well, they only have one VRRP built in that allows you to have multiple routers that share. I mean, it could be more than one. It doesn't have to just be two that can share a single kind of default gateway IP so that they'll communicate between themselves and find out who should have that IP, and everybody will filter their default gateway to there, right? If he goes down, somebody else will pick up and take over. I mean, there's things you can do like that, which are really good. But go for it, Miller.
When you do VRRP and you're doing a firewall for a business or something, you've got to make sure that you sync your NAT rules if you have any. because if they're not in sync or your firewall rules aren't in sync and it fails over and stuff stops working,
Yeah.
it could be a big surprise.
Absolutely. So you got to think about NAT is whenever you're going through a router and you're doing NAT, it's creating a connection in the connection table, right? So it knows when it translates out, when it comes back, it knows how to translate, who to translate it back to, right? Which internal IP. So say you've got multiple routers acting as border routers, and it leaves router 1 over here and it returns on router 2. He doesn't have that connection entry, so he doesn't know how to NAT that back, so that connection is going to get dropped, right? So Justin was alluding to is you need to make sure outbound and inbound are always going through the same one when you're doing NATing.
Just that the rules exist
Yeah,
on both of them.
for sure. Any other opinions on that?
I mean, high availability and redundancy in itself, it's quite a huge topic. What I would like to say on that is don't forget that if you really want proper high availability, you have to think about it on layers as well. Layer 3 is separate than layer 2, is separate than your routing protocol, is separate than, so just make sure both from the physical standpoint, there is always at least one path available. Also on layer 2, there is always at least one path because, you can have VLANs, so layer 2 can be very different than layer 3 from the topological standpoint. So just don't forget to look at it on every single layer and be sure that on every single layer you have always at least one path.
It's taken me a long time in my career to kind of slow down a little and look at processes. So when I go into someone like an enterprise like this, I look through, okay, where are all my failure points? And I go down to, okay, if I'm plugged into an outlet, if this router's plugged into an outlet, how's that outlet going to fail? I look for how's it going to fail, not if it's going to fail. I look for it, how's it going to fail? Is my utility feed from the outside going to fail? So it dives a little bit more into not necessarily a MikroTik solution or a vendor solution. It's what pieces of this fail. If you've done much in the data center world, they look at all of that stuff. How many entrances do I have coming into my building? If I have redundancy, say I have a cable company coming in and I have a DSL company coming in, are they coming in via the same pathway? What happens if someone drives their car into the side of the building and all of those are out for 2 weeks while the building's repaired? I mean, that stuff happens. So when you're thinking of stuff like that, think of everything that can fail. Just step through it. Okay, I'm looking at this router. It has a cable plugged into the outlet. That's a point of failure. I go to the outlet. How's that outlet going to fail? And I just keep tracing it down.
Yeah, that's a deep rabbit hole that you can go down. And to that end, when you're plugging it in, if you have multiple routers and you plug them into the same UPS, well, what happens when that guy has problems, right? Another thing is, say you've got a single border router and you've got multiple internet connections coming in. I mean, that's another, redundancy piece, right? How do you deal with that? Sometimes people will do like 3G backup into their networks, right? And so I'm in Texas, and I've seen during hurricanes, when they get really bad, Harvey, it wasn't necessarily a lot of high winds, but there was a lot of water and a lot of ISPs took a bath, I guess is a nice way. TW Telecom, their legacy network in Houston, a lot of it, a lot of it, there you go. A lot of it was in basements, right? And so those basements flooded, so they lost a huge portion of their network, right? And so during disasters like that, when all that connectivity goes down, what does everybody fail over to? Everybody's trying to call on their cell phone, so those networks get jammed too, right? So it's thinking about stuff like that. How far down the rabbit hole do you want to go? Do you want to put satellite dishes up? Do you need some of that stuff too? But just having multiple commodity internet connections really is usually a pretty solid backup option, right? Go out one ISP and have some kind of probe testing to something out in the real world. If it goes down, switch over to the other. I know it's not the most sexy solution, but it usually does the trick for a lot of environments.
I would say you absolutely can go down the rabbit hole. There's tons of things you can do with MikroTik gear and else otherwise, but at some level, it becomes cost prohibitive, and you have to have plans for how can I work within my budget to solve different failures. And one of the basic things that you can do is, and MikroTik makes it very easy, is to have backups of your configurations. I would do a shameless little plug that there's a tool called Unimus that lets you back up your MikroTik configuration very easily, and it would be silly not to have it. But yeah, having backups of your configuration, having an extra on the shelf. The MikroTik gear is so cheap that a lot of times just having a spare of things that are going to fail and having the config backed up regularly is enough to save your bacon.
This is so thematic of one of our podcasts. It goes, yeah, very tangential. To that end, I mean, you're right. MikroTiks are almost disposable now. They're so inexpensive. Why don't you have? How many MikroTiks? All right, for everybody here who uses a lot of MikroTiks, you got a laptop bag. Who has at least 2 in their bag at all times? All right. Who has at least 3 in their bag at all times? Who has at least 4? Right? We're ridiculous. Nobody needs that many. I came here and I've got 3. What do I need 3 right now for? Right? I always have a bunch of them. They're just, like I say, they're network duct tape. Right? Anywhere you need a quick fix, you can just wrap them up and you're good to go.
A year or 2 ago, there was a presentation, and they called it the Swiss Army knife.
Yeah, yeah.
And you absolutely can, I mean, $40 device that can go in your bag with you everywhere that can do packet sniffing and MPLS and OSPF, like share Wi-Fi in the plane, whatever else.
It's pretty bananas. I actually keep some in the trunk of my car too, kind of like any good drug dealer. When I meet people and I'm talking to them about stuff, I'll inevitably talk about it and I'll give them one. I'll say, here, give it a try. Check it out. You
Do you
know?
put a gregswell.com sticker on those before you hand them out? Or?
No. I say you can find some stuff at gregswell.com. But yeah, it's amazing. So I know some MSPs that actually, all their techs carry them now and they're starting to roll them out because, you know, I was like, hey, check this out. It's pretty nuts.
Yeah, sorry. We're just starting with MikroTik, so there's a big learning curve, but came across an issue with a 4G failover, okay? When you connect, let's say, additional antennas to it and so forth, that has its own LTE interface. And the thing is, when you build scripts around it for failovers, I've noticed that, and I reached out to MikroTik to explain this, and that the interface itself, let's say something happens to the antenna, gets damaged or something, the interface disappears. And then what it shows on the logs that it's unknown device. And when you build something around the script, the whole thing fails. Did you come across something like that, or is it just because I brought this up to the MikroTik support, and I said, why do you have an interface that if it's not connected, doesn't see it, it disappears? Why cannot it be fixed? So they said that's how it is. They might change it. I'm just trying to understand why did they do that, and in circumstances when something does damage that LTE, whatever it is, there might be to it. Is there a way to work around if you won't have that issue of the interface disappearing completely?
So
the option, the LTE option on the...
Was that a USB LTE device that you had plugged in, or?
Yeah, some of them, yes. Some of them are USBs, correct.
Okay, so what it sounded like to me is you have issues, so you're running into MikroTik with an LTE device and it's working okay, and then all of a sudden it'll have problems that'll come up on...
Nobody should even come close to it, but you know, in reality, something sometimes happens. Somebody touches that, and that connectivity separates because you know, you don't plug it. You have an extension wire for the antenna or for the dongle, whatever you have elsewhere. So when that happens, the whole thing collapses from the inside, the actual failover, because of that disconnection that happens between that LTE. I
think even if you are running into what might look like a MikroTik issue, you can always approach it from another side. If you have a monitoring solution, you can really easily fix that. I'm not saying it's a permanent solution, but you can at least know when something happens so you can fix it. So like if I see something like that, the first thing I would think is, okay, can I somehow know when this happens so I can preemptively fix this before it actually becomes an issue when it can fail over to the second connection. Of course, ideally you would want to fix that permanently, whether it's by contacting MikroTik support or figuring out if it's a configuration issue or just figuring out what it is. But yeah, you should know about things like this and preemptively fix them before they become an issue.
You see, my question is that LTE option, right? That it disappears from pretty much the
The interface
connections.
becomes unknown.
Right, it
at that
becomes
point?
unknown.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. Why not be able to disable it or enable it? I mean, it can be inactive or active, but they completely have it unknown.
Do you have an alternate internet path, or is it purely 4G? That's the only.
It's purely 4G LTE.
All right. Well, in that instance, if it becomes unknown, that router's dead in the water anyway, right?
Well, it sounds like that's an intermittent issue. Like the USB
Yeah.
device comes unplugged, it goes unknown, and you can't restore that. Anyway, I can understand maybe from a developer standpoint where you might say, how are you going to know that that's ever going to come back? And why would you keep it around if it, then somebody might complain of a cluttered interface from something that disappeared, right?
I think the one thing we can't do is, I had asked somebody one time, why do you think MikroTik did that? And their answer was, why does MikroTik do anything they do?
Well, that's my question, actually.
Yeah, it's like, we don't know inside. All we do, the first thing we think about is, how do I kung fu around this thing, right? So the first thing that runs into my mind, well, if it's something that shows up as unknown, I bet I could write a script that's looking for that thing to be unknown. And if it is unknown, I'll reboot the router, right? If it's dead in the water, it doesn't have a backup internet connection, and a good reboot might fix it, right? If you have another internet connection and you have a route going to the 4G and that becomes unknown, well, then the backup route should pick up and take you elsewhere. I wish we had a direct line into MikroTik where we could ask these questions and influence the way things may be.
I'll tell you my experience. We had some LTE setups like that. I ended up sending the support file to MikroTik. Here's the exact model I'm using, and they said, we don't support that model. So I said, what model do you support? Got that, that fixed all my problems. So are you running a supported model?
They didn't tell me no when it comes to helping. I sent them the support file.
I mean, I would specifically ask, or specifically say, here's the model I'm using. Is it a supported model? I mean, that's what I ran into, because I was trying several different models. They would do weird things, and this was a while ago, so they hadn't fully finalized some of their LTE support. And they said, okay, we support these models. Okay, I'm just going to buy the supported model, and that fixed my issue.
I'd say to that end as well, they add drivers occasionally, right? So if you make sure you update, don't just go to system packages and update there, but after you do that, go to system router board and update there, right? A lot of people don't realize there's a firmware associated with the MikroTiks as well. So you need to make sure to update that.
Right, then the one that were purchased were pretty much from their list. That's the whole thing. That was the whole list that they have. Those are the ones that were selected. But that's exactly the question. If it's selected, if they have that, why do you get that message? That's pretty much it. So.
Supported MikroTik.
Yeah, sorry.
MikroTik's also coming out with a lot of LTE stuff, so you might want to look at that. They actually have one over there at the check-in.
And I've had issues with other USB devices and external things, and going with the direct internal LTE would probably be a better way to go, because then it's obviously supported and you have a lot more grounds for why something might happen, and they have control over the product from end to end.
Somebody has more time than I do, but it was on one of the, I don't know whether it was on the MikroTik forum or someplace else, but they had a little script and it plays a song on the little speaker. And you
Super Mario?
You just set up a script that whenever it loses internet or loses its LTE, play the song, and your customer will call in and say, I don't know what's wrong with the damn thing, but it's playing this song. That shows the mentality of the customers we have.
I had a question sort of back in the routing world. Do you have any good recommendations for visualizing routing sort of health in your network? And, again, it's easy to do bandwidth math, but how do you get complex topologies and you want to know which routes are being chosen? Do you come across anything that is easy to understand and look at sort of routing health in your network and the choices your dynamic routing is making?
NetXMS is a good way to get layer 2, layer 3 networks, network maps automatically. I think I saw another tool recently. Maybe you guys can talk to that.
If you're interested if you're running OSPF networks, talk to me. I have a developer. You'll have to sign an NDA and stuff, but I have a developer that you feed your network to this program, and you can say, I have router A and I have router B, and it will pop up a map and it will show you the path from router A to router B in a representation, and from router B to router A. So you can verify your costs and all of your weighting from that. But it's a program that right now requires an NDA. So if anybody's interested, get with me and we can talk.
So I think,
well, it does not. It monitors, but if we're talking about OSPF and costing, because what you can run into with OSPF is you can have from this router, the traffic can go one way, but when it comes back, it can take another path because of costing and weighting and all of that. So one of the things a lot of people are looking for is, how do I verify that my traffic takes the path I want it to take? A monitoring tool isn't going to tell you that. You have to look at it and say, okay, I see that I'm only getting receive on this interface, but I'm getting TX on this other interface. Okay, things are weird. With a program like what I'm talking about, you can verify, hey, from A to B, the traffic goes this particular direction.
yeah, I think when you're talking about the health of a network and routing infrastructure, I think one of the core things is make sure you have a monitoring system of some sort, right? Everybody should be collecting all the bandwidth off of every interface, off of every device you have. You know, it's fairly easy to do. As Thomas has said, there's a million packages out there that do it. Find one that works best for you. He's going to say NetXMS. That's too complicated for my brain.
It always depends on what you want, right? Because monitoring and topology, and especially dynamic map building, are very different things. Mm-hmm. Also, when you look at topology, you again have to think about layers. Very different topology on layer 2 and very different topology on layer 3. Again, because of VLANs. Mm-hmm. What is the topology of OSPF? Because you can have asymmetric routing, you can have costing and all these issues. So there is actually quite many layers to topology, and it just depends on what you want to see and how you want to see it. Yeah, like Greg said, I will tell you NetXMS, because NetXMS will do dynamic layer 2 and layer 3 maps that are completely separate, that are actually built upon things like LLDP, spanning tree, because spanning tree also has a topology which is completely different from other things. So again, you have to think about all this stack of technologies and which of them are you using, which of them do you want to visualize, because it will be different on every layer for every topology of their protocol.
Yeah.
So
I think too, when you say health, like the health of my network, you know, I think different people are going to define that differently.
Yeah, just to be clear, I was asking about routing, like OSPF and routing health. It's not like the overall, like that's a much bigger.
Gotcha. So like, one thing is what, like peer stability, right? You want your peers to always be stable. Say they start flapping, you're going to have underlying issues that trying to monitor just routing infrastructure is not going to tell you that. It's going to come down to links and things, right?
Really easy thing you can do if you just want something to have, simply monitor syslog and syslog OSPF. OSPF will drop everything it does into syslog. Mm-hmm. Peers goes up, goes down, there is a authentication mismatch, there is, like, it will syslog. So if you collect your syslog centrally, again, I would recommend NetXMS, but there is a ton of other solutions, even Dude has syslog, right? So of course, you want this to be automated, so you can set up some syslog parsing rules, and you will immediately see at least those obvious issues. Of course, this is not having visualization of OSPF topology and costing and other things, but it's at least something. And yeah, like, if you can get 90% of the job done for 10% of the effort, that's great.
And I think that's amazing about NetXMS is it consolidates all of those various things into one place, right? So you can get network alerting, like all of a sudden ICMP is starting to be problematic in some area, right? And then you can correlate that with your syslog messages. You're seeing certain events, whether that be spanning tree, like you mentioned, right? Because those devices are going to spit out STP messages. Hey, I just put this port into port inconsistent, or I just shut this thing down, or anything like that, right? You can start correlating all that information. And if you have a centralized system that's going to send notifications out to you, you're going to get all that at once, right? In a lot of our infrastructures that I do, we do crazy SLAs on those things. So if I monitor from 2 different servers in 2 different places minimum, right? Especially if it's billable information, that sometimes it's 3 locations. right? Just to make sure that I'm collecting all that stuff no matter what. We also, I guess for network infrastructure monitoring, we look inside the network and then look out, and then we also have probes outside that are looking in, right? Try and kill it from both directions.
How many of you are running /29s on your backhauls? How many of you run into the problem where a backhaul can drop, but depending on where your monitoring system is, everything looks like it's okay until you see that the traffic's not flowing? I mean, your devices might be up, but the traffic's not flowing. So that's a common thing I run into with clients, is their monitoring system is looking this one way, and the default or the routes on their backhauls are pointing back to a direction that the monitoring system sees. So even though maybe the Ethernet got blown out on one side, and the monitoring system sees that both wireless devices are up, the router is up, but it's not passing traffic. So now you're having to monitor, is OSPF up or down? One of the things we're starting to do with clients is, instead of doing /29s on our backhauls, we're doing /30s between our router and our backhaul and monitoring those for various folks. That way they don't have to have various monitoring systems inside and outside.
You know, something else that springs to mind, Justin always gives me the best ideas, is that whenever I first cranked up NetXMS, one of the things it does right out of the box is every interface, say like on a switch, it looks at its port state right now, up or down. It says, okay, this is the state it's always supposed to be in. And you can say, hey, if this port ever changes state, send me a notification, right? So not that I would ever do this. Not that I would ever do this in any of my networks, but I've had redundant links go down. But again, I would never do this. But I've had redundant links go down, and then I didn't realize they went down because none of my monitoring infrastructure, you know, because I've got so much diversity in my network, the one link went down and everything just reconverged around it, and then I was single-legged. I didn't know it, right? So if you have a monitoring package that's actually watching interface states as well, that can be tremendous help as well.
Can you put something in for like monitoring, because we're in more and more VoIP-related products, like monitoring loss scores and stuff like that.
One more time, or unless you got it.
More and more VoIP requests to do.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, we're getting more and more into VoIP, and one of the things you can monitor on VoIP is MOS scores, and that's one of the things I've had the hardest time finding something to monitor MOS scores with the MikroTik firewalls.
We've got David from Pennytone over here. He's our resident VoIP expert. He refuses to join the TheBrothersWISP. I don't know why.
I'll join today. I'll join today. How you doing? Do I get a seat? Sure.
Can you get up that high?
This thing is going to hurt. Well, basically, MOS scores can only be monitored from the server because it's going to be looking at several different factors like jitter, delay, packet loss, and that's how you get your MOS score. The MikroTik, you want to do that by call. So the MikroTik, monitoring the MikroTik itself wouldn't be a great place to do that at. You really want to do that on the server, and the software you're looking for is called VoIP Monitor. That's actually the name, VoIP Monitor.
Simple.
And it's a little more on the expensive side. They charge by concurrent channel. I use it, and you will be nothing short of impressed when you install it. But going to the MikroTik to monitor that wouldn't be a good idea. What I do with my customers, because I'm a VoIP guy, I'm an ITSP, I monitor from data center to the customer's MikroTik, because all my customers have a MikroTik. So between data center and customer, I monitor that connection, and I put it in Zabbix. I know Thomas loves NetXMS. I'm going to take a look at it, because he raves about it. But, well, that's basically how I do it, and that's something you could try as well. It's really helped. It's really been helpful for me.
You should only do it from one side, because we've had it where one side, so we've had it where the server, we've had it where the server side looks good, the client side is not. So we've actually, one of our vendors put in, I think it was another product on the client side, so we could watch the MOS score there and the one at the server to compare.
VoIP Monitor, is this on? Yeah, VoIP Monitor will actually monitor both sides. It's going to monitor 2 legs, in most cases 3 legs if it's going out to a carrier. So you'll see from the carrier to your server, then your server to the customer. It does full end-to-end. Now, past the carrier, you obviously can't see, but your server can see both sides. Your server will see carrier and client, and VoIP Monitor will monitor all of that. So that's the beauty of VoIP Monitor. And it gives you graphs, and it gives you all that fun stuff. So I hope that answers the question, and I think you'll be very pleased with VoIP Monitor.
And he gets $1 every time you buy a channel. So it's great.
And by the way, yes, I would like to join the WISP brothers. See, it's on camera now, and I'm hearing you, and I just put them on the spot.
Yeah,
but,
you got to streak a mum. That's how it works to get in.
Cool, but
Giannis is going to tackle you, by the
that.
way. Get ready.
When you mentioned the OSPF, where you get data going one direction and then coming back in another direction, we're seeing that happen a lot on our network. And we've got a complete ring, and all the interfaces are set up just as default as far as the weighting and the timing. How do we fix that?
Well, by definition, asymmetric routing is not a problem, unless it's a problem for you, right? I mean, everything on the internet does asymmetric routing. That's the nature of the beast. And it's designed that way, right? Are you actually running into problems?
Yeah, what's happening is we've got, in this one instance, we've got a link that's inferior, hadn't been upgraded yet, so it's basically maxing out. And then, so we're seeing a lot of delay on the return side.
So all of those costs are interface specific and can be and apply in one direction. So you'd have to get on the device on both sides of that link that you're having trouble with and change it so that you can increase the cost so much that path will never be preferred.
Yeah,
unless there's an outage, which is why you're changing the cost and not dropping it entirely.
Yeah, cost is an integer metric you just assign to an interface. So in OSPF, in the interfaces tab, you add the interface and you put a high cost, so you make it artificially less desirable, is what you're doing.
It's all a math problem. If you have two paths, each interface has a default cost. If you're running all default cost, so the one with the shortest sum wins. So if you look at all of your...
Yeah. It's independent to that router, right?
Yeah, but I'm getting to that. But from a simplistic point, it's all just a simple math problem. It's what does it cost me to go this path? What does it cost me to go this path? And what most people don't realize is it's from the router's perspective. Yeah, it's from every single router's perspective. So when you're looking at traffic coming from the top of the network, the router has a cost to get to the bottom of the network. When it gets to the bottom of the network, that router has a cost to get back. And if those costs are different, then it's going to take the path with the shortest cost. So, these guys have some points to that, but, it's from a simplistic point, it's a math problem.
I would say that maybe if you are running into an issue at this point, it might also be worth it to approach it from a different perspective, which is the topological architectural perspective. So if you are running into this issue, maybe look at your overall topology, how your network is architected, and see if maybe there is, of course, you can always get around it and adjust costs and adjust paths and adjust how traffic flows across the network. If you want to, you can even go the traffic engineering way. So you can do MPLS-TE tunnels to specifically route different traffic based on different metrics around the network. But then again, you have to introduce MPLS, the overlay. So, you can approach this also from many different perspectives. But maybe the valid one is to just look at the architecture. Can I introduce another link? Or just try and look as well into the in-depth in one particular area. Yeah, can I adjust OSPF costs and can I adjust traffic routing to solve it? Or maybe try to look at it from the other way. Can I adjust the architecture? Can I adjust the topology to solve it? Or maybe the only answer you can get to that is, do I need to introduce MPLS and traffic engineering?
Yeah, and it sounded like you said you hadn't upgraded the link yet, so this would be kind of a stopgap until you can get it in there. So it sounds like upgrading the infrastructure is what you're going for.
So if we change the cost, do we have to change it on every router?
If you're just trying to avoid traffic being on that one link, you would change the cost on each side on the routers directly adjacent to that link. The other thing you can do, the great thing about OSPF is you can do equal path. So if you just need a little more capacity, maybe you can add a second link that's redundant that gives you a little bit more capacity that sends half your traffic over the other link.
Well, if he's going to climb the tower, he might as well replace a router.
Yeah, I don't know the
radio.
circumstances, but that's an option. If you're just saying, oh, I can't
Yeah.
afford more equipment and this
Oh,
link's
fair enough.
maxed,
Yeah.
put up another one. If you have Spectrum, then,
Oh, this guy's made of money.
oh yeah.
Yeah, he totally got it.
Yeah, I got a free lunch today, so I got that to spend.
That's right. He's got that in his pocket.
Also, one more thing which I think could be beneficial to everybody, definitely look more into OSPF, try to maybe go to a MikroTik training or something. For example, the routing training, I don't know about other trainers, but for example, on my MikroTik routing engineering training, there is 1 full day of OSPF. And if you go into that, and I think we can all agree that the more we know, the better. So yeah, maybe the right solution can also be going to a training, getting more in depth into how OSPF works, and you might find that there is a solution you didn't know about before, and yeah.
So let's all pile together our money and we'll fly to Slovakia. We'll do a routing training class.
One of the other things about OSPF is sometimes you actually want it to go a different path. And especially with some of the new radios that came out, you can add, they got 75-25 to split the airtime, or some of them even go higher than that. But if you set up to your OSPF costs, you can take advantage of, okay, I want all my downlink traffic to go this way, but I want my uplink traffic to go this way, and get a little bit more out of your radios that way.
Yeah, OSPF really only allows you to exert so much control. In that, when we're talking about elevating cost on a path, I can't pick specific routes in there to elevate the cost on. It's all or nothing. So everything in that path will do that. That's where you have to start running into kind of like traffic engineering and things like that, which is unfortunate because sometimes it's like there's one customer that's problematic that uses too much bandwidth, and if I could just change his cost individually and swoop it, that would be nice. Ugh, yeah, get out of here with that.
We just recently had some issues with packet generation using the traffic generator on the MikroTik, and what we found was that it seemed to be generating invalid packets that were encapsulated, or they had some header garbage in there that was just pushing all the relevant data further down into the packet. Have you any experience with that? Have you seen that? In our testing, we were connected straight through from one MikroTik to the other, and it was generating packets. If you stuck something in the middle to bridge and watch what was actually going from one side to the other, we would set up the traffic generator, say it's an IP header, it's UDP, it's this IP, it's this port number, and then send it through, and when you TCP dump it out, it's not.
Interesting. The only thing I've used it for is just generating tons of specific traffic on a specific port, and I never got much deeper than that.
Right, because we initially set it up as a bridge, and going through a bridge where it's just copying packets off of one to the other, doesn't know or care what's going on, the other MikroTik gets it. But then as soon as you set it up into a routing type of configuration where those two interfaces are now supposed to be routed between the two MikroTiks, and it's supposed to make decisions about it, it just goes in, and the TCP dump says this is a trash packet, and if you start stripping out bytes from it, now all of a sudden you discover that there is an IP header in there, and there is a UDP header, and it's all like pushed further down the packet.
So what I'm envisioning in my head is you've got a probe on either end of two routers, and they're supposed to route the traffic, and it hits the first router and it throws it in the trash?
Well, this was in a test lab, one MikroTik here, and a bridge in the middle that we were watching the traffic on.
Okay.
And so it was just use the packet generator to throw packets in there. We gave the packets using the interface tool, set it up to generate packets that should have been IP packets that were routable from this interface through the route over to the other side. It should have gone there, but then when we TCP dump it in the middle, we discover it's not that at all. And in fact, we were trying to reconstruct packets by hand in order to get the thing to agree that, yeah, that really is an IP header, and send it through. It was many hours of manual work to try to manually, by hand, by bit, reconstruct a real header to strap on there with a raw packet rather than just use MikroTik's things. Like the interface, the web interface to it is giving you the option of making an IP header with UDP and so forth, and all the IP address and port numbers, et cetera, all the flags you want to set, but it's as if it's shoving it further down into the packet, offsetting it by some number of bytes down into the packet before you find that.
I mean, I don't have an answer, but I'm curious, are you using the traffic generator just to test a link to see what kind of real world traffic you're...
Basically, we had a routing device in the middle that we were trying to find the theoretical maximum of what it could do, and before we could even find that, what it could do, we had to actually put packets through there that could be routed, and that's when we discovered it's not generating actual packets.
That's interesting.
So as probably anybody who played with traffic generator knows, there is a million options, literally. You can do magic with it, you just have to know how. And so, yeah, you might have been running into a MikroTik bug, or maybe it was a configuration issue. I think maybe it might have just been easiest to write an email to support.
Yeah, I mean, we were just playing with it the other night, and it was something that came up where it looked like we were creating packets that could have been routed through that thing, and then when we go to try it, it's not even a packet at all.
That's interesting.
Have you checked with support at all on that?
No, we haven't talked to them yet.
I wouldn't be surprised if you came up with a situation where you were using it the way you would expect it to work, which is different than they'd expect you to use it.
That's never
And you
happened.
might be able to just explain to them, this is what I'm trying to do, and they'll be, oh yeah, you didn't check this box
This and
or
this
whatever,
and
you know?
this. Yeah, that's happened a lot, especially with new features. Alex is usually the guinea pig. He'll figure it out for us. You don't have an Alex, though, do you?
What's that?
I said you don't have an Alex, though, do you?
No, we don't.
He's not one of the little brothers yet.
Get an Alex.
Yet. Yet.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you mentioned OSPF being able to handle equal cost paths. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like as you grow your network, you add more redundant links, maybe, you know, sometimes things happen organically as you get access to new high sites. And like, that's one of the things that's always been hard for me to visualize is that impact of that load balancing by OSPF on my customers' traffic. Like, it seems like magic just happens. But beyond that, like that load balancing when you have, say, 3 or more equal cost paths, is that all healthy? Or is there anything you should look forward to know something might not be healthy?
You shouldn't run into any issues. The same path should hash the same over the same length. And anything that is dependent on separate link performance or anything shouldn't be an issue. I've certainly deployed multiple links over the same geographic path and had no issues with that.
Actually, I prefer ECMP in redundant environments.
Yeah, and even if you, you can buy links that will do like a 25-75 split, but a lot of times you're, just looking at sending the same amount of traffic over both equally, and I found it to work just fine.
Yeah, I like it especially for varied environments, right? If you have equal cost paths, you're constantly loading both of these links to some degree. So if there's degradation on one of the links and you have problems, you discover it really quickly. Whereas if it's just a backup link and you never use it and then all of a sudden your primary fails and then, oh my God, why isn't this working? And we're in the middle of a thunderstorm and I can't get out there to fix it. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's nice to have a little bit of testing going on over that stuff.
Kevin Myers had a MUM presentation, I don't know if it's last year or the year before, about, was it last year in Denver, about using, was it using VLANs across OSPF to do some traffic engineering. So you might want to look at his presentation.
Just one important thing regarding if you do ECMP or any kind of asymmetric routing actually, just be careful that in transit, like on those transit routers, you don't drop invalid packets. Because if you do routing 2 ways, I think we already mentioned this with regards to NAT and other things. Just remember that if you drop invalid packets in forward firewall, and you only have one part of the traffic going that path, the returning traffic on the other side will be considered invalid because the connection tracking table doesn't see the other side. So just remember always when you are doing any kind of asymmetry, be it ECMP or even network-wide asymmetric routing, be careful about the forward invalid drops.
If you do a lot of ECMP and you try to implement MPLS, you're going to have a bad time because in the current routing engine, MPLS does not understand the multiple paths. It'll only pick one. So you've got to be aware of that.
you're going to have a bad time. I like that.
I'm not sure if it's still an issue, but probably is. If you're doing asymmetric routing and you have trouble with SNMP, it's because MikroTik doesn't necessarily send the SNMP out the same interface that it came in from. So something else to be aware of. Yeah, it's source IP address.
Yeah.
Hey, that's loud. I manage a couple hundred MikroTiks, and a lot of times when there's a bug fix or a rollout or a config that I need to push out to everybody because I've refined some sort of configuration in the firewall, do you guys know of a product or a service that I could use that will allow me to control like a couple hundred MikroTiks with a few clicks?
Great question, audience plant. Thomas.
Yes, self-advertisement warning. And we did not talk about this before. Why are you doing this to me? I don't like self-advertising. Yeah, anyway. What was the... Yeah. Come to our Unimus booth and let's talk. Yeah.
I use a product called Rundeck, which is a DevOps and allows you to do parallel SSH basically with a web interface. It's open source, so it works. Rundeck.
There's a free and a paid version of that, right?
I'm only aware of a free version, but there might
okay.
be a paid.
All right. I think Ansible can do that too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are we? Hey, Pauls, how are we doing on time? How are we doing on time?
I wanted to go back to, oh, I'm sorry.
Last question.
All right.
Make it a good one.
Well, I'm having problems with doing, I guess he might have hit on it. I'm having problems with MPLS and failover. In particular, running multiple tunnels between the same set of endpoints seems to be fraught with difficulty, to be blunt. There are some workarounds that I found in the wiki, such as like setting multiple loopbacks on one tunnel, but it doesn't scale. And even the examples that they have in the lab, have you guys ever done this? Because I'm trying to find somebody to talk to try to get it running.
Our MPLS expert is in New Zealand at the moment. Do you guys have any experience? I haven't done multiple tunnels to a single device and had problems with it.
Gotcha, because the problem I'm having is the actual presence and absence of the routes. Like if something fails, the other route's just not showing up.
And it never comes back, sort of thing?
Never comes back.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's a...
Yep.
Yeah, he's saying that it's there and working. One fails, and then when it returns, the routes never come back. I believe that's a known bug in MPLS at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, basically the backup L3 routes just...
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's a known bug. I remember Thrift talking almost specifically about that issue.
And the LSP debugging tool is like non-existent in MikroTik, so I'm just banging my head against the wall.
I think you're looking for version 7, I think, on the fix, or maybe it'll be ported.
The unicorn version with the rainbow?
Hey, man.
Oh, it's a pack of Skittles. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, all right. Well, I guess it's time for us to wrap it up. I'll wrap it up in the traditional fashion. Thank you guys for coming to the presentation. One more? Do we have time for one more? All right.
Hello. I just wanted to add to the parallel SSH, whoever mentioned that. There's a Python library called Paramiko that you can automate SSH connections for remote command execution. So you could loop through, say, a range of IP addresses. But if you don't feel like doing any scripting, there's a terminal out there. I know it's available on Linux, not sure about Windows. It's called Terminator, where you can divide your terminal up, in parallel terminals, say 6 terminals on your monitor, and what you type in one terminal is duplicated across the array of terminals. And you could use SSH within that, FYI. It's interesting.
Yeah, there's also a Mac OS tool called iTerm too that lets you do the same thing. And there's tools that run inside your Linux, such as tmux that'll let you emulate.
Yeah, tmux. Just thought I'd throw that there.
Yeah, cool,
Sure.
cool. All right, well, I don't want to eat into more of somebody else's time, so let's close it out. Alex, if somebody
Hello.
wanted to catch you on the internet, how would they do that?
The Little Brothers. You're going to tell them how to get there, right?
Yeah, patreon.com/TheBrothersWISP. Jump in there. Become a member. We actually have our first Patreon. Nick is around here somewhere. There he is. He's got gorgeous hair, too. Look at that. Yeah. Miller, if somebody wants to catch you out on the internet, how do they do that?
Facebook probably is the best way.
You're not going to pimp the blog?
I haven't updated the blog in a while.
Doesn't matter.
I probably had to do something on Rundeck on there.
Anyway. Thomas, if people are going to get you on the internet, how do they do that?
Yeah, just Google for me. I'm fairly easy to find all the social networks.
He refuses to say Unimus. Go to Unimus.
I don't
Find
like
him at
self-advertising. But yeah, unimus.net.
But
probably
yeah,
easier
Unimus.
to
Go to
find
Unimus.
me.
Yeah. All right, Wilson.
He's also got some YouTube videos on NetXMS that he's done.
Really
that
good
are really
YouTube
good.
videos. They're solid. The golden voice. Wilson, how are people getting a hold of you?
j2sw.com. And hey, we got a, you need to tell them about your newest thing.
Nah, it's not ready.
Yeah, you need to pimp that too.
No, it's not ready yet. It's not ready. When it's ready to show people and human beings, I'll talk about it. But you can find me at gregsowell.com. You can find all of us at TheBrothersWISP.com. Facebook, that's really Mike's thing. We're too cool for Facebook. No, it's just a really good platform to find us. But the Brothers Wisp Slack, I love it. I wish all of you guys will join us in there at some point. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.